Welcome back, everyone, to Movies After Midnight. I'm your host, Evelyn. I am joined once again by Aaron.
Hi.
And we're taking a little break from Dracula. A little aside here. With what year was this?
1986?
Okay, yeah, 1986's Gothic, which was a film I had not heard about until about 2 days ago when we watched it. And it was a ride.
I will explain everything.
I think it was a great time.
Everything.
But man, am I railing?
I think it's a stunning film. So my story this year with this film has been, I'd never been a huge fan of Ken Russell. Okay. Mm-hmm. The first film I ever saw from Ken Russell was The Lair of the White Worm, and I just remember hating it. And so imagine my surprise when Criterion, not sponsored,
yet.
One of their collections from like January was Ken Russell. So I was like, okay, let me at least watch a couple of these, I guess. Maybe I just didn't get it at the time, or like, I haven't rewatched Lair of the White Worm, but I have watched a lot of his other stuff that was available, and he's really grown on me. I think he's a really great director, actually, and he's incredibly campy, and I think visionary in a way that I'm actually shocked more people don't talk about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a British director. He did struggle with alcoholism in his later years, but he has some really, really interesting work, and I highly recommend giving it a deep dive, especially if you're a huge fan of old Hollywood type films, because I feel like he's a really good 70s 80s update to that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that. I was gonna say I think this was my first interaction with any of his work.
Oh, his stuff is it's honestly bananas. And it's extremely it's a lot of religious commentary, if that's kind of your gag. He's very much unpacking a lot of British culture as well. But there's just an over-the-top campiness to him that's really interesting, and I think the type of sexuality that he shows is kind of queer coded in a way, but he's not a queer filmmaker. And so there's something interesting about that too.
I was just thinking about some parts in this film. I don't know if there was any queer coding in this film. Except for the part where two men openly fuck and kiss each other on the lips. But aside from that, I don't know.
Well, I don't think Ken Russell ever identified as a gay man in any way, as far as I know about him. I'm very new to him. But so I watched this film and I couldn't tell how I felt about it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I watched it again the next day, and then I was like, I think this is one of my favorite movies of all time. And then I just didn't know. I wasn't sure about it, and then I kept reflecting on it. And then I made Evelyn watch it with me again 2 nights ago. And here we are. And I did put it in my Letterboxd top 4.
Honestly, it was very, very iconic. Not
it's a wild ride.
It didn't hit me on the same profound level it's hit you at, but we stand.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because we've talked about Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
And at the beginning of Bride of Frankenstein, there is that vignette with everybody, Mary Shelley talking to everybody.
Yeah.
And this event in Gothic, the film, is alluded to in that little section of Bride of Frankenstein. And this film is about it's a fictionalized retelling of a real historical event that we just don't have all the details on. And that retelling is the Shelleys, before Mary Shelley was married, they went to visit Lord Byron wherever he was executed, or he was exiled. And so they go to visit him for the weekend, and his friend John Polidori is there. And whatever happened over the course of this weekend, which is super shrouded in mystery, we just know that it happened. But whatever comes after is Mary Shelley's release of Frankenstein, and then Polidori's release of The Vampire. And so this whole event is like predated these two authors reviving the Gothic horror genre. And so the like gag has always been that people assume that whatever happened during this night gave everybody the inspiration to go and then write those things. So that's kind of the romanticized retelling that you see in this movie. And then you see it in a lot of, I think you see it in a couple other movies as well. Like, I don't think there's a movie about it like this one, but it's definitely something that's brought up a lot. So that's like the quick little...
Yeah.
And I got scared the call hung up because you were so quiet.
No, sorry. I was just absorbing.
No, that's okay.
This is going to be a lot more of me listening than usual, I guess. But yeah, I was...
Get ready, everyone. Just kidding.
That was interesting to me, where it was like, it was a lot more focused than I feel like stories like this usually are, where it was like, you know, we start with them showing up and it's like literally like one like night's story pretty much. Which I think is like, the pacing to me was really interesting, not to get like ahead of anything, but like,
no, that's okay,
because it did feel like, at least at the start, it felt very, on the one hand it felt kind of surreal, but on the other hand it also felt very realistic, where they show up and they're just stuff like happens, where they like immediately start like looking around and like doing stuff. And so yeah, it is this very like, just like a snapshot kind of thing.
I think that's a great point. And I think the whole time too, it feels in a sense in real time, because it almost feels like you're like another friend there, the way it's shot.
Yeah, I could see that.
It feels like you're in on the experience in a really intimate way.
Yeah.
But the film opens, and it opens on this kind of voyeuristic note. You see a collection of people looking on to the island that Lord Byron is exiled. I keep saying, almost trying to say executed. He's slip. Very much alive. Yeah, literally. They're watching from a telescope, or like a little scope or whatever. They are keeping an eye on where Lord Byron is. And then they're talking about how he is exiled over there. And then cut to, like Evelyn said, Claire, Mary Shelley, and Percy Shelley are all going into they're like right in on a boat. And Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley aren't married yet. And then Claire is a friend of theirs who has been seeing Lord Byron sexually.
Yeah. Also,
and she wants really quick. Claire wants to see Lord Byron again because she's in pursuit of him, and he's kind of being hot and cold with her, and so she brings Mary and Percy. But what were you gonna say?
Just in terms of cast, there were a lot of like we were talking about. There were a lot of recognizable people that weren't like because the one I zeroed in on was Gabriel Byrne is one of my favorite hey, it's that guy people in movies. And he plays Byron. And then Julian Sands, who I knew from the Warlock movies, plays Percy Shelley. Peter Pettigrew from Harry Potter plays Polidori.
I think that was a huge part of why I like this movie. I've been like dying to like Timothy Spall in a movie. And not that I don't think he's a good actor. I think he's a great actor. Just like every single character he's played, I've been like, oh, I'm scared. Cause but this one, I really loved him in this one. I also love Natasha Richardson as Mary Shelley. She famously played Sally Bowles in the revival of Cabaret.
You told me that, and I reacted to it like it was new information.
You were like, wow.
But yeah, it's not like it. I wouldn't say there is like a. It's kind of about the journey they all go on, but it does start to kind of focus on Mary Shelley a little bit, and she definitely like makes that work. Cause like
yeah, it's really nice, and I think it's a really good testament to how well done of a film this is, because I think when you have such a big ensemble and it's just like these 5 characters, you kind of need one to be the person that's being followed a little more than everybody else, so you know where you stand in relation to the experience, I guess.
That was another thing. I think maybe just because it's such a tradition in British film, a lot of this film felt very theater, at least at the start, in terms of how things were set up, where it's like the way the conversations flowed felt very theatrical.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it's so interesting. They get to the house and immediately there's some line about how surreal the environment feels, and I think Percy says something along the lines of like, well, it looks like it's the end of the world, and it's a really interesting like through line. But I think it speaks to that surreal quality the film has, where it does feel like it's taking place in this liminal space of like reality.
Oh,
and
yeah.
In that way, it feels like one of those like chamber plays where it's like 2 people suspended in a room that exists in like nowhere. And I think that's also a sign that it's a very internal film, and it's a very like mental film, which I think is so fascinating how he weaves in the like dream state through the film. I think it's really, really interesting montage.
Yeah, and I was gonna say it's also because we get like they show up and there's like immediately this dialogue scene, and I thought the way everyone like is set up so quickly and yet clearly, like almost from the very first moment, where you get an idea of like each of these people and what they're kind of about. Like I'm trying to think back to exactly
like
what it was.
Percy being an atheist, and like Lord Byron being all wanting to have sex with everyone,
being a fucking edgelord. And
Lord Byron is just like
yeah, or their like relationships to each other too, because I noticed this is where I get to talk about one of my favorite things. Wardrobe coding. Like they do a lot of that pretty much right away, because you have the 3 the Shelleys and Claire. They arrive and they're in the Shelleys are in this very like white clothing that kind of like, because also the way everyone behaves, it gave me the vibe that like everyone is very childlike in this movie. Like the way they're like running around and like, oh, let's chase each other around, and like it felt like a bunch of kids like kind of hanging out almost. And then you get like them in this kind of cementing that with like their pure white clothing, but then Claire has red ribbon around it, so it's like she's also childlike, but she's kind of connected to this stuff. And then Byron has this like super shiny red coat, because he's the one who's like bringing them into all this crazy shit. And then Polidori has like this green coat where you can see he's still kind of like, he's almost like he's like an older kid, where he's like still in this childlike state and like kind of does what, like, not subservient, but like less than I mean, pretty much.
He's a sub.
He's a he's
a
Byron's
sub.
bottom. You think that's a joke, but but like where he's got that connection to Byron, but he's not quite to the same level. So he's not pure white, but he's not covered in red either. And like as you go through the movie, the way they get like dirty or they throw their coat off or whatever, it like kind of reflects the journey that they're going on. And it was like it's like I feel like at this point, clothing like Hitchcock style wardrobe coding is such a basic bitch thing to fixate on, but this movie did it really well, I thought.
Oh my god, yeah, no, I think it's like a testament to Ken Russell, because he's a very opulent director, And so I think you really have to pay attention to those kinds of things as well. Because his films are a very sensory experience.
Oh, yeah.
In a way that I haven't really seen before. He kind of feels like the more opulent, over-the-top version, answer to like how the film I removed from my top 4 to put Gothic in was Nashville by...
Oh, damn, Nashville's out of the top 4, huh?
Nashville is... Oh, I was so sad about it, too. I love Nashville. Nashville is by... Oh, my God, I'm losing my mind.
Hang on.
I'm losing my heckin' brain. Robert Altman. Sorry, everyone. It's after midnight.
It is.
If Robert Altman is like such a master at like the grounded in reality, like day to day, how people relate to each other and what our lives are like, I think that like Ken Russell is the over the top, highly opulent, our mental state. Like if we had unlocked, like, what do they say? Our brains are like, we have like 30% of our brains.
Oh, yeah.
If we were operating on like 40% and we're on a lot of drugs, that's Ken Russell's movies. So they all settle in really quick into the house.
Yeah.
And then, John Polidori, he's already there with Lord Byron. And they all hang out together. They meet John. And it gets to sundown pretty quickly.
Yeah, because well, we do get that kind of like, not really a montage, but like immediate, because I think they're like eating dinner or something together, and then they all split up, and everyone's kind of like wandering around the place and seeing all this like weird shit that's around. And also, I haven't been able to figure it out.
Oh yeah, they all play hide and seek.
Yeah, which again, that was like, again, it felt very like a bunch of kids hanging out, having a sleepover. But the way he finds, there's like the like sexual like porcelain doll of like an Asian lady, and then there was like
crazy.
'Cause in another shot, there's a part where someone, I think it's Byron, but he like sneaks up on Mary, and he's like wearing this monster mask. And I could be mistaken, but I want to say that was like a Japanese like Oni mask. And I was like, it's interesting that I wasn't sure what that through line meant, but I was like, it's interesting that he has all this like Asian Japanese influence stuff, and that they've made like a point of showing that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where it feels very old Hollywood-esque, because there's a big, interesting, and I think it's a relevant and important criticism of old Hollywood, where it was a lot of, like, pillaging the East of its culture for the aesthetic enrichment of old Hollywood movies without, like, respect for the original culture.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think it's making commentary against it, old Hollywood, but I just think it's like reflecting old Hollywood, and so you see that through line too.
Yeah.
But I think in a way, Lord Byron, I mean, I think he's directly compared to the devil by everybody.
Yeah.
And really early on in their interactions, you get the sense that he is like really the one in charge of everybody, and he's using not just Claire, but like every single person. He seems to have this like sexual He very clearly gets power through sex in the same way of a character like Frankenfurter. And so I think him having this like representation of death mask too, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And
he's kind of a bringer of death in a couple different ways. We'll get to Evelyn's favorite scene way later, but...
But yeah, masks are interesting too, because I think a big part of the narrative, like I'm trying to avoid getting too ahead, but like I think a big part of the narrative is that like a lot of the characters, like including Byron, are kind of like they have these pretenses of who they are, and then they get stripped down over the course of everything. And so they bring that in like super early, like the fixation on masks and stuff and personae.
Yeah. So okay, they all have dinner, and Claire gets all pissed off at Byron and then bites his hand. And then BDSM immediately happens, and he almost burns her by the fire.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where Byron is first equated to the devil, when really he just wants to have an orgy with everyone. So, like, that's kind of where it gets into the historical context of the scene. They're all kind of there to just have sex and do drugs.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because they do exist in this childlike place, but I think part of that has to do with this privilege they all exhibit and exert.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the interesting things that I've heard about being an artist at this time, and I think this is true of being an artist at any time, but especially this time,
is you take lots of drugs.
It was said that exactly. No, it was, and I think they take opium too, so I think that's another through line with Lord Byron.
Oh yeah,
being really obsessed with the East, but or this aesthetic of the East, you know.
Yeah.
Or I lost my train of thought. And then something.
Yep.
It's after midnight, everyone.
Yeah. Oh, not just being the privilege and like the artist.
Oh yes. So it's like with Mary Shelley being a writer, it's established really early on that she's a writer, but she's very sheepish about it. And John Polidori, he's a doctor, and he kind of writes a little bit and dabbles into it. You know, to be able to reflect on the human existence in the way that you need to as an artist. At this time, you really had to have a certain level of societal privilege to work and make like surrealist work.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people talk about that in relation to like Coco Chanel versus like Elsa Schiaparelli, where Coco Chanel had more of a blue collar upbringing. Mm-hmm. And so her artwork reflected that in that it was very suits for the working woman, modern lines, it's very clean. Whereas Elsa Schiaparelli grew up extremely privileged, and so her work takes on a surrealist like quality that doesn't need to be of this world. And so I think there's a lot of implied commentary with that, how they're all able to like just spend the weekend sitting and thinking about what their deepest fears are, or even the idea that they can confront their deepest fears it's very interesting.
Yeah.
All that to say.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of privileged kids.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it's this might have been why you brought it up now, but it ties a lot into some of the stuff we talked about with the last Dracula movie we watched, where you have like the three guys who are like bored with life, and so they wander around like going to sex dungeons and whatever, where it's like this idea of like they've lived it. I think that's also part of it, where they've like lived this excessive life. And so like it's only someone who's like lived at this level of privilege where they can try everything gets so bored that they start exploring these like fringe surrealist spaces. Because that's also kind of, it seems like when stuff really goes down, there's a hair of that like Hellraiser thing where it's like they've tried all these ways to explore their own fears in their own minds, and like nothing's quite hitting, and so they keep like kind of pushing the envelope.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think in a way with privileged people, if you don't have like anything to be tormented about in your day-to-day existence, you kind of torment yourself. So that you can feel something. The victimhood of the privileged class. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so after dinner, everybody goes. It launches exactly in Gothic. So they launch into a game of hide and seek after dinner. Mary hides by a suit of armor. That's very important.
Oh shit!
There's a slipper snake. There's a snake wrapped around the armor. Claire goes into the downstairs wine cellar area. She's caught by Lord Byron. They fool around because Lord Byron can't keep it in his pants.
Literally.
And then Percy, that's where he finds the very strange, I would venture to say, little problematic.
More than a little.
Yeah. It's like, and it's kind of interesting how there's this through line of animatronics.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's historical or if that was just something Ken Russell decided to do, but there's a couple of different like animatronic like
they definitely seem like something that would have been around at that time.
Yeah, because they're kind of like wind-up dolls, just huge.
Well, except isn't one of them like they make you think it's a wind-up doll, and then it's like actually a servant he has like in a mask or whatever? Or was I just completely misinterpreting that?
There was that was when he makes him put on the mask, like in that one.
Okay, yeah, yeah, no.
I think it's a little different. I think that one's just an actual person. That was a wild scene, though. We'll get to that.
Yeah, a lot of S&M in this movie.
Yeah. And, oh, wait, yeah, I guess so, because, when he's interacting with this, like, it's a very, like, it's just a animatronic kind of woman who's, like, dressed up, and he presses, like, one of her nips, and it, like, drops her, like, lower half. Like, it, like, unclosed her, and then he tries to touch her, like, lower half, and then he's, like, smacked away.
Yeah, that was... I couldn't tell if that was like... If that was because it was a real person in there, or if it was, like, part of the animatronic gag.
Oh, is that it? Yeah. Honestly, I have no idea. Because one of the interesting things that happens in the movie pretty much immediately is... Which, I guess it does hold out a pinch longer until they take out that book. But, you know, it's kind of hard to tell what is and isn't happening.
Well, I was going to say, already, like, being reminded of these early stages, it does kind of... Where everyone goes at the start does kind of, like, reflect where they end up, sort of.
Oh, 1,000. It's so interesting. And so then, yeah, because there's a huge interesting through line with all of them, and I think it really speaks a lot to how strong everybody's arc is through the movie. Lord Byron ends up, not Lord Byron, John Polidori ends up going to his room. He's kind of like a loner through the whole thing. Yeah. And it's so fascinating. Polidori's room is completely bare. The whole bed is covered in white sheets. And then there is a crucifix of Jesus over his bed.
Yeah.
Honestly, Ethel Cain core. I'm just kidding.
Literally. Which is, I don't know if that's also ties into religious imagery. Because I know a big thing when... I think Anglicans do this too. Because there was... The Anglican church is like... When King Henry was like, I'm going to start my own church that's like Catholicism, except I can divorce people. And then like Lutheranism started like a little before that, I think. And like, but like a lot of those religions were like, we're not Catholics. And so we're going to take all the like ostentatious shit that Catholics do and like throw all of that out. And so a lot of their churches are like super barren. Because they're like deliberately getting rid of the iconography, and his room kind of has that vibe, which again ties him to, I feel like, English religion especially.
Oh yeah, and I think Ken Russell has a really interesting history. I don't quite know off the top of my head where this film falls in relation to it, but I know his biggest film was The Devils, and I think he denounced Catholicism after one of his movies and like converted to something else, but he has a really interesting through line, so those threads being in this makes so much sense. But I think it also speaks a lot to Polidori as a character too, and how barren and stripped down he feels like he has to be to repress his urges.
Yeah.
And so Mary gets incredibly freaked out by this suit of armor with a snake wrapped around it. And she rushes downstairs and ends up in the library. And that's when Lord Byron and Claire scare her with that mask. That's the... What did you say the mask was?
It looked like an Oni mask. I could be wrong.
Yeah. That would make a lot of sense if it was, to be honest. Because Ken Russell feels very specific about the details. The one problematic, strange thing that I don't like was the weird lady dressed up, but We're past that.
Yeah.
It'll come back up again. Yeah. Okay. So after this, a storm starts up, and it kind of further launches this group. And at this point, they've started kind of doing drugs. They've started all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so Lord Byron is checking all the floors during the storm, and then he sees Percy naked on the roof. It is wild.
It's
very like if you read Ayn Rand ever, it's the opening of The Fountainhead where it's like Howard Rourke laughed and he's just naked laughing.
That was a fucking pull.
What, you didn't think I would know anything about Ayn Rand?
Avid Ayn Rand reader Aaron here on Movies After Midnight.
She just Ayn Rand. What do you mean, Evelyn? Ayn Rand is who I live my philosophy. Just kidding.
I'm like, how can I seed cancellation here?
I'm an objectivist. That's the worst joke I've ever made in my life. I take everything back. I'm not an objectivist, but back to you. Percy's naked on the roof.
Yeah, that was the moment where I was like, okay, this is what kind of movie this is gonna be.
Oh yeah, and he's like standing there and he's screaming for lightning.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell? And so they're like, get the fuck in here, get the fuck. Sorry, I didn't mean to say the F word on YouTube. They're like, get back in here, Percy. What the hell is wrong with you? And then they're drawing off Percy. They're all back inside, and Percy's talking about transcribing his dreams and all this crazy stuff.
Which also I think this movie did a good job of avoiding that. But like avoiding this, but did feel like one of those moments where you as the audience are like, oh, lightning, Frankenstein, I get it. Aha.
That could only mean one thing.
But yeah, the fact that they work it all into everyone's arc. There's never like, my parents are watching through the Canadian murder mystery TV series Murdoch Mysteries right now. And it's set in, like, I think the early 1900s. So they like to do this thing where they have characters that are either significant historical figures, or they're like, imagine if we could talk to each other through handheld radio devices someday. That'd be amazing. And, like, goofy call forwards to history. And, like, this definitely isn't that type of movie, but it did a good job of, like, alluding to the future without having to, like, stop the movie and stare at the camera to do it.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good point. Oh my god, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that. That's actually incredibly interesting.
Because she talks about later, she's talking about like being afraid of like who we're giving life and everything, and you're like, oh, Frankenstein. But again, it ties into
Frankenstein
or
Frankenstein
Polidori with the leeches, and you're like, oh, leeches, vampire, okay.
Yeah, and I don't think that, really quick note on that, though, I don't think we know that Mary Shelley, because there is some stuff that comes up too. We'll keep going, actually. I won't make this point until a little bit.
Okay.
Actually, because we're not quite there yet. But yeah, so they go inside, and they all start reading Phantasmagoria, because Lord Byron has picked it up somewhere at some place. I think they read the story Family Portraits specifically. And, you know, the story is about, like, a young son and all this stuff. And the story is interrupted by that leeches and rice prank. So, Polidori has pranked Lord Byron by putting all these leeches and rice. Yum. But, yeah, and it is the through line where he's the one who wrote, yeah, like you said, vampires. And then Polidori's like, well, I'm going to bed. And then Lord Byron kind of throws a little fit.
Yeah.
So, at this point, Claire's kind of the more all over the place, for lack of a better term, person in the group, but she starts to hallucinate a little bit, and this is kind of where it's the lightning, especially with Percy out there. This is where the film kind of becomes incredibly surreal, and I think it's really interesting because they're all on drugs, and so it's not an approach like Midsommar where it's like, oh, whoa, it looks crazy. Everything's all wavy. It's like shrooms. You know, it's kind of like intercut in the montage with like dream sequences being cut into like, it's so fascinating. It feels a little like the live action version of like Paprika, how she's going in and out of like real life and like her like dream state.
Yeah.
It's very that. And Claire starts hallucinating this knight in the family portrait story approaching the son on the bed, and the knight has like this like erection in like this knight suit.
Yeah.
But then he's in front of Claire and he picks Claire up and she's like screaming, and it's really crazy.
Yeah.
It's really wild.
Which like the like knightly cod pieces, I guess, were an actual like thing that a lot of period suits of armor had.
Whoa.
And like some of them are just, they look stupid, and it's like, I get why they don't do this. I get why they don't do this in movies, because depicting the actual reality would look so silly.
It looked crazy. It was crazy. And so Percy, you know, this is kind of a moment where everybody kind of goes to their own devices and is up to their own devices. I also really like that part of the film, how everybody goes away and then comes together.
Yeah.
And then there's two paired off, and then there's two. I really like that. But Percy is clearing his head, and he finds Polidori. Polidori is worried that Percy has been doing too many drugs, because Percy at this point also starts to become sick. So Percy and Claire are kind of the ones that are really becoming undone with the drugs, whereas like Mary, for example, Polidori and Lord Byron, they kind of retain their sense of self the whole time.
Mm.
And I think it's a testament to how Percy and Claire are a little bit more weak-willed than everybody else, or they're a little bit more at everybody else's mercy than Mary, Polidori, and Lord Byron.
Yeah, I think there's a really good, later on in the movie, there's a really good like illustration of that, which I'll get back to.
Excellent. Oh, I'm kind of talking far away from the mic.
What? Oh.
Sorry, everybody. I'm trying to be better. Oh, I was talking away from my mic. Sorry, everyone. Excellent.
Yeah.
They talk about, this note says they talk about vampires. And then I have this quote that was like, when they said, my only talent is a good singing voice.
Oh, yeah.
I like wish I could, it was like that Little Mermaid where he's like, la, la, la. I kind of wish they had broken out into song to show us.
Perfect.
So
but
after this, the orgy happens. Oh, yes, sorry.
I was gonna say, do you think that ties into it, where the fact that, like, because I think it's Claire who says that, right? Like, do you think the fact that, like, since she's, like, the other three are, like, artists in this very intellectual way, and she's, like, a different type of of person, kind of, like, do you think that's why she kind of, like, loses herself faster in terms of, like, what's going on in this film?
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, I guess, because there seems to be and Evelyn and I have been talking a lot about, like, the nature of being an auteur and, like, retaining this, like, sense of style, I suppose, versus, like, not. And I think, like, her identifying as a singer as opposed to like a songwriter or something else, there's a certain amount of control she gives up to be able to sing. And so she's more at the mercy of like, what do people want me to sing? What is somebody wrote for me? What are songs that already, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas like Mary and Polidori are kind of like out of air, pulling what they think about the world and transfixing that into a narrative that's allowing them to process through things. You know what I mean? Not to say that like just singing isn't valid, but I think if we're talking like the characters a little allegorically.
all the singers listening to us right now are like, I'm not gonna listen anymore. that's singers sing everything.
Movies after midnight is bad. Oh. So after this, they all sing with Caesar and have an orgy. That was a Showgirls reference.
Hey.
I think it's interesting because Polidori is just there watching while everyone's having the orgy.
Yeah.
And this is where we get our second burst of lightning. Mm-hmm. So a tree is struck by lightning outside during the orgy, and something bursts in the window.
Yeah. Which, yeah, this was where I started, like... I'll need to watch this movie again, I think.
I'm telling you, I'm telling you, that was my experience too.
Because, yeah, I've tried...
Wait, did you have a thought?
No,
oh, okay, got it. I was just making sure I wasn't going to cut you off. Okay, got it, Slay. So after this, they all, they're all feeling their spooky vibes. And they're like, you know what? Let's get drugged up and have a seance. But before, as they're like kind of preparing for the seance, it's honestly one of my favorite scenes in the film. Polidori and Mary have this scene together where they connect on the fact that they're both writers. And she opens up to him about having lost her child. And this is kind of the most where I saw the Frankenstein. And this is where that point I was going to make earlier. We don't know for sure, I don't think. I think it's just I don't know a ton about Mary Shelley, but as far as I understand, we don't know exactly what inspired her to write Frankenstein. Exactly.
Yeah, I've
but
heard...
the film is... what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I've heard the loss of a child as being the thing this movie kind of goes with. I've heard as a theory before.
Yeah, and this movie is following that theory where she has lost a child, and that's kind of part of like this is a fictionalized telling of an actual event. So we just know the event happened. Nobody's clear on what exactly happened during it. But I like this world in which Polidori and Mary kind of like find... Because I do think that Mary is written extremely progressively in the film.
Yeah.
And I think her connecting with this gay man about how they both feel like they're in this world that they can't fully participate in, that they don't fully understand. And the only way they can begin to unpack that is through their writing. I really, really loved it. And this is the point in the movie that I really, 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 I really liked. I really liked it. I thought it was incredibly sweet.
I think
I was also excited to see Timothy Spall play someone who is nice.
Yeah, well, as we watched that, I was like, oh my god, he's so nice.
He is. He's like the nicest.
He's just a really sweet guy who's tormented by Catholic guilt.
Who's what?
What?
Are you homophobic, Evelyn?
I said he's tormented by Catholic guilt. Did the mic not pick that up?
The mic did not pick up tormented by Catholic guilt. It just went silent. That's so funny. He is very tormented by Catholic guilt. And let me tell you, I know a lot of people who are tormented by Catholic guilt.
It gets it, yeah. I had
myself included. We're all there.
I was tormented by Protestant guilt for a while. That shit hits different.
And that is wild to me because you are Pentecostal.
Oh yeah, we're just gonna we can unpack that some fucking.
We're gonna Gothic by Ken Russell is allowing us to unpack our own.
I don't even know what movie I would need to unpack all that baggage.
Evelyn and I are going to be launching a Patreon where we're going to be performing a seance and doing drugs together.
Exactly.
So
live streaming it.
So exactly. So yes, then she makes a statement about how, I'd give anything to bring back my child and blah, blah. And something was really heartwarming about it. Honestly, it makes Frankenstein more sad. But one of the big things we talked about with Frankenstein is how sad it is that he's just this child that doesn't understand the world.
Yeah.
And he's kind of just like, it's kind of horrifying, And I think that read on Frankenstein is incredibly sad, especially if it's like her child.
Yeah, because it's. I think that's that's why people have drawn that through line, because it makes sense that she would be lamenting on a sort of the story of a child that never gets to grow up.
Her and Percy aren't actually married yet either.
Yeah. And that's like a big part of her conflict too, is like that she's kind of accepted this role as like the sort of mistress kind of, and like she's clearly not happy with just that, and like standing up for herself more is definitely part of her arc.
Yes. And so then they go into the seance, and Claire gets real crazy. She claims to see her mother, and then she has a crazy breakdown, and it has a seizure, I believe, as well. You know, the seance scene is wild.
Yeah, I was taken out of it.
I really love it. I thought it was great.
It was great, but I noticed the whole time Percy is just like mogging. Like he's like looking at the ground, and he's got his cheeks sucked in, and he's like
mewing so hard.
He is keeping that mewing streak going, goddamn. And that just took me out of it a little bit, but
he is ready for TikTok. I think I was so focused on Claire, because she is just like, whoever plays Claire is just giving her whole all into it, that I just was so focused that I didn't even look at Percy. Yeah, it was wild. And so after this, you know, they get Claire to bed, and then they all discuss the seance. They have the seance over a skull.
Yeah.
And it's to summon somebody. Anyway, Claire has the breakdown about her mom. They all discuss the seance, and Mary becomes extremely protective over Claire. And it's an interesting moment for her arc, because I agree with you, like you said, like Mary needs to learn to stand up for herself. But it's interesting how she dips her toes into those waters by standing up for Claire.
Yeah.
So Claire kind of becomes a proxy for Mary standing up for herself.
Well, especially because I think it's around here Claire, like she mentions
not yet.
Okay.
It's not yet.
Okay. I thought, no, never mind.
You're getting close, though.
But the unspecified thing we'll get to it also makes sense.
No, you could reveal it
now. It makes sense that Mary would project onto her because of that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with this through line that Mary has lost a child and wants to be a mother.
Yeah.
I think in a way Claire is her child.
That makes sense too.
And so everybody stays with Claire that night. And then wait, is this where let me look ahead really quick. Yeah, I think it's a little later actually.
Oh.
That she
okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was earlier.
No, wait. Oh, I meant the information you were about to reveal.
Yeah, that's for some reason in my memory it's like super early on.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's kind of like anyway, we'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah.
It's after midnight.
We're like that Pedro Pascal meme was like, you should know this too. Hey audience.
You should know exactly.
You guys want to talk about this with us also?
Somebody said the other day, they were like, everybody who has a podcast, that just means you should just have private porch talk, and you shouldn't have a podcast. Evelyn and I, this whole time we've been engaging in porch talk, and you guys have been listening. So after this, they put Claire to bed. Everybody, you know, Mary stays with Claire and all that stuff. Polidori and Lord Byron have their own little aside in the front room. They talk, and it's very clear that they have some sort of sexual relationship, and that Lord Byron is a user.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the scene you were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So there's this crazy scene that happens now. And it's interesting how everything happens. Like, it's not a traditional movie where, like, there's, like, vignettes and everything. Because it's a very, like, over the course of an evening. And the film feels kind of in real time. A little.
Yeah, that's everything kind of bleeds into each other. It's not like this scene and then this scene.
Yeah, so if talking about it, if us sharing, like, the scene sounds a little, like, clunky, like, and then this happened, it flows a lot better in the narrative, but just to be clear on the details.
You have to kind of pick, it's like the river's flowing and you just kind of have to pick stuff out of it. You can't, like, take a chunk of it.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it, actually. Yeah. And so Lord Byron, he kind of turns Polidori away. He doesn't fully engage in anything with him. And then he goes to this room, he calls his servant and has her put on a mask, very like, it was like that movie, that show Spartans or whatever, had a scene like that. I remember it was one of the first sex scenes I'd seen as a kid, and I was like, whoa! They, like, have sex, but, like, they both have, like, these masks on because they're supposed to hide their identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that was, like, a thing that happened in Roman times or whatever. But he has the servant put on this mask in a similar way, and the mask is for somebody called Augusta. And then he gets on his hands, he, like, gets her naked, and then he just starts sobbing on his hands and knees.
Yeah.
And so that was incredibly fascinating. And an interesting character moment, because it's the first moment of vulnerability you get from Lord Byron in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Which I think, again, without, like, getting too ahead, I think he's an interesting character to watch unravel, because I think his masks out of anyone are the most built up metaphorical masks. And, like, yeah, because I think I joked, like, he's an edgelord, but, like, you kind of get that idea of him where he's got this pretense of, like, I'm this badass who denounces God and doesn't care about anything, and then the more we learn about him, it's like, is he just saying that so that he doesn't have to deal with, like, the guilt he feels over being, like, this person or whatever, or, like, dealing with the consequences of certain things.
Yes. 1 second. Sorry, I had to mute my mic and burp. Apologize. I think you heard that, Evelyn, but the mic...
I did, but yeah, the audience did not. That one's for the Patreon people only.
That one was for the porch. Exactly. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, Lord Byron. It's like that thing, Evelyn and I have been discussing this, like, psychological phenomenon that the more a person kind of projects and showboats, the, like, more insecure they are. And I think Lord Byron is a great example of that phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because he's overplaying just so much that he doesn't care about anything, and then the way he's breaking down at this is so fascinating. And I'll tell what happens after this next vignette, because I think it's relevant. Like, I just want to talk about it together. All of his servants gather and watch from the door. They, like, sneakily watch as Lord Byron is having this moment, and he catches them watching him, and he, like, sends them away. And I think it's really interesting how all of the working class people around kind of aren't even fazed by his falsehoods because they know who he really is.
Yeah.
But also that shame of, like, he's hiding it, but they all know. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean...
But, oh, yes.
Yeah, no, I kind of forgot. I forget... When you're watching the movie, you forget that they're there. And I feel like that's very indicative of the vibe, like...
Yeah, and it's so fascinating, too, because, like, you would, like, they're, by the end, they're going crazy. They are screaming, running around, all this stuff, and the servants are just not present, and I think it goes to that, like, what was real, what was fake. You know what I mean? Which, who knows?
Yeah, which I think also works in the like, historical context of the film, because it's this event that we don't know what happened. Even by the end of the movie, it's still up for interpretation what happened.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. And also this idea that, like, they're all laughing at Lord Byron, and this whole time, like you said, he's been a badass dude who's like, I use women, I don't care, I have orgies, I do drugs. And then everybody's just gathered around laughing and pointing at him when he has an emotional moment. Which is very...
Yeah, it's very giving, like...
As they should.
Like 14-year-old boy who wears black t-shirts and writes Shadow the Hedgehog fan fiction.
What is that little emo kid on TikTok? He's like, I'm gonna kill my mom. I'm gonna kill my dad.
Literally.
Little emo boy.
Yeah.
So while Lord Byron is crying with his servant in a mask, Mary and Percy are upstairs in the room with Claire, and they're arguing about Lord Byron using Claire. And it's a little bit that same thing where, like, you could kind of tell that Mary's upset because she sees herself in Claire.
Yeah.
And so Mary is of the opinion that Lord Byron is using her. He's going to just, like, ditch her, and it's not going to be right, and Claire's going to react badly. And Percy is of the opinion that it's not that serious. It's not their business. It's, like, whatever. They all believe in free love anyway. Like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, which I think you also get kind of that, I guess going back to, like, masks and reflections and, like, simulacra and stuff, you get where as much as Mary is kind of projecting onto Claire, Percy is kind of, you can tell he's like, Byron's a cool guy, I want to be more like that guy. And so he's very like when they're trying to talk, she's trying to talk to him about stuff, he's very biased because he's like, Byron's the cool guy, what do you mean? And like, so it's like he's projecting onto Byron in a different way almost, where he's like, I want to be more like that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, but that guy is kind of an asshole. And he's like, no, he's not.
That guy literally sucks. And so, Shelley spends the rest of the night taking care of Claire. She takes a look at Phantasmagoria and she gets a little weirded out because she starts to like see parallels to the book versus like what's happening in there. And on the wall in the room, there's this huge painting. And the painting is called The Nightmare. I forget who has painted it. I'll look it up whatever. If you look up the poster for this movie, it's referenced in the poster and all this stuff. And it shows a woman like laid out in bed. And there's this little like, a devil gremlin thing. And he's like crouched over her on her stomach. And it's like a painting about like nightmares. A lot of people interpret it as nightmares. Some people interpret it as like an obsession kind of narrative, that type of thing. But Mary has this nightmare where she's in the painting and the demon is encroaching on top of her, but she wakes up to realize that it's just Claire in bed with her. So she wakes up and she thinks she sees somebody outside, and then this is when this information is revealed that Evelyn was talking about a little earlier. It's revealed that Claire is pregnant with Lord Byron's baby.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say?
I was just going to say it makes sense that, because that's when you really see Mary start to like really identify and become protective of Claire, because she's, and you almost get the sense that and like advocate for her baby, because I think later on someone's like, yeah, he could get an abortion, what's the big deal? And she's like, really? Or but it's like she's almost projected onto Claire having a baby as like her second chance to like bring a life into the world almost.
Yeah. Yeah, and then she panics and thinks she sees somebody stalking them outside. Percy decides to go and check. And he sees a creature.
Yeah.
Which the creature, I will say, the creature is hilarious. It looks like crazy. It's like a furry, like... It almost looks like a messed up Furby. Like a Furby and a werewolf combined.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, you never really get a like full clear look at it, do you? Except maybe like
the closest is like that barn scene with Polidori.
Okay, yeah.
That looks crazy. It's a little crazy.
Which again, I think it like because it does have this kind of messed up nature, which I think because it's kind of an abstraction because it's almost like it's a different thing to everyone who has to deal with it almost in a way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it kind of looks like that mask that he was wearing earlier in the library too.
Yeah. Yeah, which I think really hits.
So I think it's interesting too. Like, oh wait,
I was gonna say it really works in the like dream kind of element to this, where it's like it's a thing that's kind of pulled from all these images that existed during the day.
Yeah. No, that's true. We have one mind because that is the point I was gonna make. You are so smart.
Okay, we're such film intellectuals.
We are so intellectual. So as Percy is going to check, Mary goes to confront Byron about Claire, and this is when Lord Byron is like, "Well, just tell her to abort it. Whatever. I don't care about anyone." And then it's crazy. Lord Byron leaves, and then he ends up in the kitchen, and there's a pig's head on the ground, and he hallucinates that it's Polidori's head on the ground.
I forgot about this part.
And like that, his head is fully shaved too, which is super surreal. So Byron makes his way all the way down to the wine cellar where him and Claire previously had this moment. And he finds a bunch of goop. And he touches the goop. And you're like, no, ew. He touched the goop. He got the goop touch.
I hate that you're calling it goop, but honestly, that's the best descriptor.
I thought it was, like Gwyneth Paltrow's brand.
I was gooped and gagged. Am I? That was something. That was a good one. Can you tell I'm still processing this movie because all my insights are like.
Oh, I can't. This episode is as surreal as the movie.
Literally. I'll just put some fucked up visualizer instead of the usual thumbnail art.
Genius. So, as Lord Byron is going on his journey, and it's kind of interesting. Another movie we've discussed here that I would say is a little similar in theory is The Howling Five. And so it gets like a pinch whodunit through the middle with this creature where everybody kind of has these, like you said, everybody has these little vignettes with these creatures where they either see a manifestation of it or they see this like goop that's been left behind. This goo that's been left behind. This fluid. This viscous liquid. So
this pre-cum.
As that's happening with Lord Byron, Mary finds Percy trying to stay awake. Percy is having a meltdown about the creature, and it kind of launches Percy into an even more distressed state. So now you have Claire and Percy pretty much out for the count.
Yeah, because they're still. Yeah.
And during Mary's confrontation with Byron, it's really interesting because one, we've had two men now. This happened the first time Mary talks with Percy about Claire, and then it happens to the Lord Byron, where they dismiss her and then try to come on to her and have a sexual encounter with her. And then she pushes them away and goes to deal with everything. But, Lord Byron and Percy both kind of plant the seed in the back of Mary's mind that she's jealous of Claire.
Yeah. It's very. I
think it's terrible. It's very sad.
Yeah, well, I had a thought about. Okay, this is what I thought about, and it reflects back to Byron, where during these conversations, with Shelley and Byron, you get it's almost this interesting like deconstruction of the like of their rebel archetype, because they're like, I'm rebelling against all these like societal power structures and stuff, but then when she's like, but I want someone who's gonna like give me a commitment, or like, you know, like not just like fuck around all the time, it almost becomes like their rebellion is actually just an excuse for them to like set up their own power structure that they don't have to be held accountable in.
Yeah, and I think for the men, I don't think they're actually, and I feel this way in real life too, I don't think men are actually interested in sex as much as they are. I just think they see sex as a tool of power over somebody.
Who was it who had that quote about like everything's about sex except sex, which is about power?
Yeah, I don't know who did that quote.
It was like an old person.
Quote. I wish I said that. Could you imagine if you said that and you're being quoted for it? You're the cool. I'm just kidding. I should watch whoever said it.
Everything is about sex.
Crazy.
Oscar Wilde said that.
Oh, I love Oscar Wilde. That slays. That is an Oscar Wilde thing.
I thought it was Oscar Wilde, and I wasn't sure.
But there's something about that that's so true, though. And I think that's really where the movie excels, is that, like, you know, it's very real because it's how our minds work. So even though it's an incredibly surreal experience, it really reflects how we feel, because, you know, it kind of going into that, as Mary is taking care of Percy and, like, helping him after his meltdown, Byron goes to Claire and he starts like eating her out, and then she has a miscarriage during it.
There's a joke about swallowing babies in here somewhere, but I don't know if I want to make it. That's what I thought during the movie too, and I was like, do I make this joke? Do I just go there?
That's a good one. That is a 10 out of 10. Super fascinating allegorically. And then also it's like the color coding is very much involved in this moment, because then, you know, she's like, her white dress is all stained red now.
Well, and isn't that when it's like juxtaposed, right, with
with poor boy Polidori.
Yeah, and he like takes the like crucifix falls off his wall, and he starts like reaching up and just like smacking his hand into the nail again and again, which is like also a weird thing, because it makes sense from a religious guilt, because he's like piercing his own hand with a nail, which is also like a, I was like, I get to use the word stigmata in this podcast. But which is like, he's like, I think it illustrates just how like much he's like martyring himself and stuff, because he's like, he's like not taking.
Well, and he's been put in this position where Lord Byron has come on to him sexually, made it clear that they've had a sexual relationship. I don't know historically, but certainly in the movie's context.
Yeah.
And it's not carried through. You know, Byron doesn't go have a sexual encounter with him like he's had with everybody else. And so he's left to his own devices in his room. And instead of like fantasizing, or instead of like, you know, anything like that he could do for himself, as Lord Byron is having sex with Claire, you know, it's cut in beat, like, it's cut, like Evelyn said, it's cut together. And he's like, it almost feels like it's also referential of like this guilt he has for being a gay man as well.
Yeah, because he's like, he's penetrating himself, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And like he's self-harming in an incredibly intensive way, as opposed to just like, you know, fantasizing about what he wants. He feels so much shame and guilt around it, and it's a really devastating moment. Honestly, it's really sad.
Yeah.
And also, Polidori does have a shaved head at this point, and I But I kind of missed. What did he have a wig that he took off, or did he shave his head?
I couldn't tell.
I thought he shaved his head,
but it seemed like maybe it's a wig or just because I think later on we see him and he has hair again.
Yeah, and the next day he definitely has hair.
And so that made me think it was a wig, but also like again because nothing in this movie is like definitively real.
Like the dream logic. Yeah. It's true. Poor Polidori. Yeah. And then she's had an abortion. All right, she hasn't had an abortion. She had a miscarriage. Yeah. Mary and Percy then get into a fight over Claire. It's a continuation of their scene while everything has happened. And then after this, Mary leaves. Her and Polidori have another vignette with just the two of them, where she sees that he has some wounds on his neck, and he's saying he was bit by a vampire. And this is when his head is revealed to everybody as being like he's bald. Oh my god, he's bald.
What? Like SpongeBob. Bald.
And yeah, so he has these wounds on his neck. He says he was bit by a vampire. And they all, at this point, think that they have summoned something that is now encroaching on them.
Yeah.
In this scene, it's also revealed that Polidori is gay, and he's really scared of eternal damnation, which kind of contextualizes the scene that we talked about where he's self-harming.
Yeah. Which is that line what like Byron has some line where he's like you're gay but you won't like something about like you'll do these things but you won't commit to it or something.
Which projection to the highest degree.
Oh yeah.
Real rich of Lord Byron to be telling my sweet baby Polidori that.
Starting
Makes me sick.
Starting a Polidori fan blog.
Literally. So this energy rushes in. It's unclear if it's like a spiritual entity literally or if it's just like rattling house, like wind through the window type thing. But Percy has a little bit of a breakdown and he thinks he's chasing a ghost out of the room to save everybody. And he pulls out a gun and shoots the ghost, thinking it's this creature that he saw previously. But instead he just shoots himself in the mirror. Oh, excuse me. Jeez, I just burped as I said that.
You punctuated the gunshot.
That was the gunshot of my burp. I'm so sorry, everybody. Percy pursues the ghost and shoots, but he ends up shooting himself through the mirror. Whoa, we live in a society, don't we?
Holy shit. But I mean, yeah, it makes sense with all the projection and everything so far.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it looked so good. It reminded me of that that scene in Evil Dead where he chokes himself out in the mirror.
Oh.
And then it cuts to him holding his neck and then he takes a step back into the frame and then you see he's just choking himself. I think that moment felt like that, and I really love camera tricks like that. I think that's been really missing out of a lot of movies lately.
Mirrors are fun.
They're so fun, I think.
That was another thing. This whole movie, I was like, this movie would make such awesome like AMVs. Like there are so many wicked music video visuals.
I think that Ken Russell would have been a hell of an AMV editor. But he wasn't, or maybe he was reincarnated.
That's the take of the ages.
Somebody who became an AMV. Yeah, this is the take the internet needs.
Ken Russell would have been a
Porch
awesome
talk
AMV editor.
What can I say? I'm a film scholar. And so the craziest thing that happens. So we have another through line with Percy looking at boobs. Percy ends up in the same area that Mary and Byron had their discussion. And he finds Claire sitting there waiting for him. 1 second. I had to take a sip of my drink. I've been having a lot of meetings and talking a lot lately. And so my voice is like... My voice is like an old man.
Yeah, that...
So, Yeah, they're in the same place that Lord Byron and Mary had their interaction, and Percy unclothes Claire, but she's not bloody as if she's had the miscarriage, which is a carry-on with the dream state, but it's very interesting to just note. And Claire's breasts, her either nipple turns into 2 eyeballs.
Yeah.
And they look at Percy.
Which is like...
I thought it was wild.
Which is like a nightmare he described having earlier in the movie.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like, I think I messaged, I was like, new top surgery goal.
Well, it was... Well, it was super funny because I didn't know what Evelyn would say after that moment happened, but I knew she would say something. So after the moment happened, I immediately... How Evelyn and I watch it was we count it down and then we hang up the call and watch it and text each other.
Yo.
And so I was texting... I opened my phone to text Evelyn and she was already typing. I was like, I knew it.
Which, I mean, I feel like you can't not comment on something like that, right?
I would have been more shocked if you just blew past it.
Oh, yeah, she got eyeballs on her nipples. That happens.
I see you. And so then after this, Polidori makes the first attempt on his life. He is stopped by everybody, I believe.
Yeah, I think.
Or is this where he was in the... I think actually this is where he's in... Is this where he's in the barn? Or is that the second
this?
time?
I get kind of lost after this point. Yeah.
I have to check my notes. One moment, everybody. It's after midnight. No, this is the one where he's in the barn.
Okay.
Polidori goes into the barn and he tries to hang himself. However, before he can hang himself, he's sitting on a horse and he, I'm about to hang himself. Yeah. And before he can, the horse rushes away. The rope falls from the ceiling. It wasn't tied enough. I was about to say well enough, and then I was like, I don't know if that's the way to describe it.
You do a good
the
job.
Rope wasn't tied enough. Thank God. He falls just onto the ground, with the full rope, and then the horse rushes out of the stable, and this creature falls onto the horse and rides away. And so there's a couple of times there's a literalized, creature.
Yeah.
But you don't know if it's like a shared hallucination because those kinds of things are also kind of common. And, going off of the idea of a seance, seances historically have been a shared hallucination experience and less of a spiritual experience compared to like a ritual or something like that.
Arthur Conan Doyle has entered the chat.
He said, hello.
I realized I was like, I don't remember any of this, and I realized it was because I was texting about the eyes thing, and I think that's one of the best and worst parts.
You were like, ever since I saw her eyes, I couldn't stop thinking about getting lost in them.
But one of the best and worst parts about this movie is the thing. Everything like we said, it keeps everything kind of bleeds into every other thing. And so it keeps going, and so it's definitely a movie where if you look down to send a text message for a second, you'll have missed a lot of you'll have missed a lot in a way where pretty much every moment has some importance to what's going on. And the fact that I missed out on this scene while looking down to text you kind of reminded me of that.
Oh my God, yeah. And I think that is a testament to, I keep calling Ken Russell an opulent director, but I think that is a testament to his opulence. There's not a single moment wasted.
Yeah.
And it doesn't overstay its welcome. And that's something I really, really respect about him as a filmmaker too, because I think, now I just think my biggest critique is that I wish there were shorter films now, because I don't think every film needs to be as long as they are now. And I kind of wish more films were like this, where it was that hour 20, that hour and a half.
Yeah, well, I checked the time and I was like, shit, this isn't even a full 90 minutes, I don't think. But yeah, which to go back to clarify my earlier statement, like I'm someone who there's a lot of movies I won't watch because I'm like, I know I need like all my mental energy to focus on this because I know it's gonna ask a lot of me as a viewer, and so I don't get around to it until I'm ready. And I think that's an interesting thing where this movie is like it requires you to kind of keep pace with it, but it also, I never felt like it was demanding a bunch of me either. I was able to like absorb the experience kind of.
Yeah. He's a good director in that every single thing is telling you how you should like, not how you should think about it or anything like that. It gives you space to think, but like it's giving you a clear perspective the whole time.
Yeah.
There's nothing up for debate. Like every single symbol, every single costume, every single thing added, every single thing referenced, all of it has to do with those central arcs with everybody, and this like idea of like facing your biggest fear and either letting it destroy you or letting it help you create something.
Yeah.
It's really a lesson in, and I think as we're getting into the climax, we're going to kind of see the payoff of a lot of this now. But it's really, a testament to when you're confronted. I saw this really interesting thing where like when you start to like process the trauma and the terrible things that have happened to you, there are like a few different stages with which people kind of drop off and decide that they're done processing. They don't want to process anymore. They've had enough, X, Y, and Z. And that's a little bit more related to like I guess like chasing your dreams or whatever. But I think this film is a lesson in everyone reacts extremely differently to like their repressed traumas.
Yeah.
And it's not that anyone is affected lesser. I mean, everybody has extreme trauma in this movie that's like pretty comparable to each other in one way, shape, or form, or like, you know, that is earth-shattering and world-changing in a way for each character. But every single person reacts so differently to it, and it says so much about who they are. And that's really just very fascinating to me. I'm at this point in my life right now where, like, you have, like, huge life events happen, and you see how everybody reacts so differently to it.
Yeah.
And you know that everyone is different, but I think until you get these moments where you can really see how who people are affects how they can or can't interact with certain things, it's really, really interesting. And I think that's why I really, really, really appreciated this film.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's very like, I think it being kind of an abstract, I mean, it's not super abstract. There's like a clear narrative that happens, but like a lot of the elements being abstract kind of even pass that quality onto the story itself, where it's like what you take away from it, like says something about you or helps you understand something about who you are.
Yeah, and Evelyn described it a great way. How did you describe the difference between surrealism and Dada?
A dream still means something within its own logic. Like a dream still has meaning. Like the way I was like I don't, maybe this is just how I have dreams, but like if someone in your dreams is like, you can't wear shoes, that's illegal, that doesn't make sense in real life, but in the dream, if you end up putting on shoes, like the cops will probably show up or something, because there is like, yeah, surrealism has logic to it. Dada is like,
they're rules.
Yeah, they're rules. They're just not the ones we're used to. Whereas Dada is just total, like, not total. I mean, total nonsense, kind of. But yeah.
Boo! I hate Dada.
Yeah, surrealism, because I think a lot of people associate the two, and yeah, surrealism is not. I think that's where they differ. Is that surrealism makes sense within itself, whereas like Dadaism doesn't always.
Yeah, and I think this is a good example of something that's surreal and clear. Because I think a lot of people claim surrealism because they're unsure of themselves as a storyteller.
Oh, damn.
But this is not that. Sorry, I'm not trying to drag anyone. I'm just, I'm a film historian.
I
and
agree
I'm just
with
making
you,
an observation on film history. If you're offended, that obviously just applies to you, and do better. No, I'm just kidding. So back to the film. Mary, and this is kind of also where Mary becomes the titular character, because it's also at this point in time, Mary is the only one really, like, she's very distressed, but she's the only one really handling the situation in a way.
Yeah, you said she becomes the titular character, and now I'm like, Mary, you've finally done it. You've become Gothic 1986.
She becomes the main character. Sorry, everyone. It's after midnight. I tell ya.
I love when she said it's Mary Shelley time, and she Mary Shelley'd all over that guy.
That's my secret. I'm always Gothic. Dark black tears, they stream my broken cheeks. Or what the hell is that? How's that song go?
Something like
the Kyle Gordon one. Something about black tears staining your cheeks.
Yeah.
So, Mary tries to escape the house. She is over it. She's done. She ends up crashing into a door in the garden, and everybody joins her. It's just Lord Byron and Byron and Percy, and they all are certain that they have to do a seance again. And a very fascinating turnaround at this point. All of the atheist men are now like, we need to put the spirits back. They're all believers now. Very interesting.
Yeah. Which I think that...
And this was a... Oh, yes, no.
I think that illustrates like what we were talking about earlier, where they were like, they claim to be against all these power structures when really they just want one that they're not held accountable in.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. That's true. It's very true. And my favorite part, one of my favorite visual scenes in the movie happens now, because to transition out of this scene, you see the snake now that we saw on the suit of armor earlier. Now the snake is on a statue of a woman holding an apple. And as the scene ends, the snake crawls out onto her arm and breaks off the arm with an apple. It is as if Eve has consumed the apple off of the tree, and now she is aware that she is naked.
God damn. It's a really good visual. I also
got a little ahead of... It's such a good visual, and it's done so well, and it's so cool. It's just a big old snake.
I mean, I think that's the thing, is like, when you describe something like that, it sounds like it could be so corny so easily, but like nothing in this movie comes across as corny.
1,000%. And I think it's really because he commits so hard.
Yeah. Committing to the bit is so important. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, people don't commit to the bit in movies anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of movies want to be extremely intellectual and like aware of itself.
Yeah.
Whereas movies like this just, I mean, I feel like there's a different type of authenticity to the intellectualism of something like this versus like something trying really hard to make a statement about like some, you know what I mean? Anyway. Yeah. I'm trying to not say a specific movie name.
Just drop a list.
No, literally. I got a little ahead of myself though, because so they're all decide they want to do the seance. They all get back to the house. They tell everybody else. Polidori attempts to shoot Byron. The men get into a fight. And then that's when he goes to hang himself in the barn and sees this creature. The first time earlier he tries to kill himself, everybody stops him.
Okay, yeah.
I got a bit mixed up there. So Polidori's in the barn. He sees the creature. He tries to hang himself. It doesn't work out. And then after this, the seance is recreated. They're like, we got to get rid of this supernatural force that is encroaching upon all of us. We have to put it back into the bottle.
Yeah, which... Yeah,
we're watching so many out of the bottle films.
I mean, it's a really good template for horror.
It really is.
Yeah, this scene is really interesting. We can get into it a little before, but I think a lot of the like visual outfit coding really comes out in this scene.
Oh yeah, so they all go down to the basement and they hold the seance. Mary decides she doesn't want to have the seance and she hates everybody. Yeah. And I get it. And she fights off everyone. She finally stands up for herself in this moment. Do you want to talk about the color coding before I get into everybody?
Because is this after like Claire shows up and she's like got her...
Yeah, and she's like so Mary ends up getting Lord Byron. I wrote Mary destroys Lord Byron, but I don't exactly remember how. Claire, as the seance is happening and as Mary is like fighting everybody, she's crawling around kind of like the creature in the painting that was referenced earlier. Yeah,
and she has a rat in her mouth, or like she...
Oh, yeah! Ooh. There's all these rats everywhere.
And she's like... Yeah, and this is where we get into like the outfit coding, because it's like... So Claire is like, she shows up and she's been like tweaking out or whatever, and she's like covered in mud totally, and it kind of symbolizes how like of everyone she's like completely far gone into the nightmare at this point. And then also at this point,
the literal personification of like the nightmare creature.
And also at this point Byron has lost his coat. And you can see he has kind of like a dirty white shirt on underneath like everyone else, which again goes back to that, for all this pretense of him being this like cool intellectual who's at the top of everything, when he's stripped down, he's basically as much of a like child as everyone else is. But then the two of them are like, oh yeah, she's showing us we have to... something about, I can't remember what they say, but they're like, we have to destroy our fears or something like that. And they start like the two of them start getting all like covered in dirt and everything, and it kind of like illustrates how they're like also kind of losing themselves to this horror and this like this like need to control. And Shelley's the one who like resists and runs off in her like dress.
Oh, really quick, could I cut you off? I'm so sorry.
Okay, yeah.
The Mary destroying Lord Byron, she reveals that the Augustus earlier was one of Lord Byron's young family members, I believe, that Lord Byron was in a sexual relationship with. And so that was the carry through on Lord Byron's greatest fear, which is back to what you were saying. He's losing himself to the nightmare.
Yeah, which I think ultimately at least what I took away from it is, you have these two men, like you said, who are like, they're like, we're going to take control of this and we're going to fight our nightmares and make them go away. And Mary is the one who like resists this and like sees that by trying to fight it, they're just kind of like becoming more consumed by it. And I think ultimately like she doesn't quite get there in this moment, but by realizing that's not the way, I think we kind of get to this idea of like, you can never like destroy your nightmares. You have to kind of figure out how to like live with them and deal with them. And it seems like that's kind of like this scene sort of illustrates that they're trying to like take control of these things that you can't really take control of. And by trying to do so, they just fall more and more under that control.
Yeah, and it's interesting too how like the two men try to strong arm this supernatural and this like mental force that is our fears, our greatest, what we're scared of, all that. But that's a really great point. That's a really great point in this team.
Yeah.
Yeah, she goes to stab Byron logistically, And I think, what do you think about, so Percy and Byron begin to like make out?
Yeah. Which I'm not sure. To me that just felt more like, they're
them like becoming consumed in each other.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it makes sense because, like, I talked about Percy wanting to be more like Byron, so it makes sense that Byron would be part of his consumption, kind of.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to the idea that, like, sexuality is more of a exchange of power, because it's like Percy and Byron making out allegorically is like Percy is taking on Byron's as an equal. So after that, Mary flees again, and this is when she's really confronted by all of her fears in this crazy sequence. The boy at the beginning that there's reading, you get during the reading of Phantasmagoria that they do earlier on, you get this scene of a little boy on the bed, and it's carried through, and you realize that little boy is the representation of Mary's lost child, and you see her, having a miscarriage. You see her going in this room of doors. She has to decide what to do, where to go, all this stuff.
Yeah, and
in the last moments of it, oh yes,
I was gonna say, through these doors we also get like a kind of a quick like clip show of these memories from her life that illustrate stuff that then kind of give way to like weird like visions of the future that could be kind of. So she's confronting all this stuff, but we as the audience also kind of get more clarification on what exactly it is at the same time.
Yeah, 1,000%. And it's really nice because I just really, really appreciate how I don't think Mary's completion of her arc is this moment where in the end of this montage, but I think it comes when it comes when she refuses to be a part of the seance. I think that's when she truly steps into herself and is able to confront all this stuff about her. And in her hallucination, in her like dream state, in her, heightened I don't know what word I was trying to say. Anyway, she tries to jump off the balcony and Percy stops her.
Yeah.
So kind of the come around from Percy being on the balcony.
Oh yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. And then the next morning, everyone's in the garden and everything is fine. Yeah, and everyone's like, we're going to go write stuff. It's very, very... And it almost seems like nothing has happened.
Yeah. Yeah, like it was all a weird dream or something.
It was all a dream. But I really like that the movie doesn't say that.
Yeah.
I hate movies that like explain it away by like, oh, none of that made sense. Isn't that a crazy dream?
Yeah, well, I think,
but everything made sense, and that's why I think this is such a great film to watch if you like surrealism.
And I think the way Byron says something like the ghosts that exist at night can't hurt you during the day or something like that.
Yeah, and then the final moment of the film, which is so interesting.
Yeah,
it completely reverses the opening. I absolutely love it. And the ending is exactly it's a tour of, I believe, the Byron estate, and it's a tour guide explaining that essentially all the historical context that we gave about the event, that like everybody, had this night here, and then afterward Mary Shelley went on to write Frankenstein, and then Paul Dory went on to write The Vampire, and it revived Gothic horror.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that it ends on that note of like all of this led to her writing that like carries on even into today, because I think that's where I kind of got the idea of like the ultimate lesson of like her arc is that instead of trying to like destroy her fear and prove she's not afraid of it anymore, she sort of lived with it and understood that like what it was, and that allowed her to create this thing that carries on versus like not doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's just such a beautiful arc, and I really like how it's like the female lead is so centric to it, and it's like really I think strong in that way. But I think that statement of like to like the most auteur driven works, or the works that stick with us the longest, are those ones that are so specific to our experience and so deeply understanding our own experience that it's able to touch everybody who sees it. And it's a grand irony in that way. You have to get so specific to yourself to reach everybody around you.
Yeah.
I do have a theory.
Oh.
So, exactly 10 years after this movie, the It's All Coming Back to Me video by Celine Dion was released. And before that music video of that cover of that song, Ken Russell directed a band's cover of It's All Coming Back to Me Now. And I believe that the aesthetic in the Celine Dion It's All Coming Back to Me Now was deliberately referencing this Ken Russell film.
That would be so iconic.
That's my theory. That's my theory.
That's just a theory.
That's just a theory. That's just a theorizing. Do we ever know why he said it like that?
I don't know. I never saw that particular video, so I don't.
Oh, I guess it was a reference to a video, huh?
Yeah.
I had no idea. But yeah, that was Gothic. Thank you for letting me share it with you, Evelyn.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I really appreciate it.
I'm
glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's...
One of my favorite films of all time is Showgirls. I love it unironically. And anytime I show it to somebody, I'm like, you don't have to like it. I totally get if you don't like it. And they're like, no, we're going to like it because it's one of your favorite movies. And then they watch it. I've had this experience with so many people. And then they watch it and they're like, well, it was like pretty okay. And I'm like, you don't have to. It's okay. But I'm glad you actually liked it.
Yeah. Which, I'm going on record. Aaron showed me Showgirls, and I was on board. I like Showgirls.
Well, you are also sick and twist. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, yeah, but that's not related to anything.
That's real. That's true.
But yeah, I think this reminded me. I joke about it, but like, I mean, I think the Hammer movies we're talking about are good movies, but I'm like, I only ever watch like goofy B-movie cult shit, and then I watch something like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, some people actually watch like really well-made movies that give you lots to think about. I forgot what that's like. I haven't been in film school in a while.
I think all movies give me something to think about.
That is true.
I'm gonna be honest, sometimes I hear people talking about movies and I'm like, do you even like movies? It's okay to know. Yeah. But also, I think B movies are valid, Evelyn.
They are, but I forget like what it's like to watch movies that aren't B movies. And this was a nice little reminder of that.
Yeah, and I felt it was kind of fitting because, like, you got the Mary Shelley and the vampires, and so I felt like it was...
Yeah. Wait a minute. What was the... I'm trying to remember
what was the what?
Was this...
Sorry, I'm laughing because I keep muting my mic to burp, and Evelyn can still hear it even if you guys can't.
I'm trying to remember
I'm so sorry, Evelyn.
Polidori's vampire was... I can't...
It's like the one that's spelt like VAMP.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember because actually...
Because I think that one's also like really big for queer coding. And like... But back to you.
Okay, it's not the basis for it, but in terms of vibes, the 1932 movie Vampire, like, I feel like probably had at least some influence on this, because the arc is really similar, where it like descends really subtly from like reality into like full bonkers dream, and then yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I get to talk about that movie.
Yes, I love a good 1930s.
It's like, it was an interesting one because I think it's like, it's a sound film, but it's got some title cards in it too, because it's like that era when it was like kind of half silent film, half sound film, and that was
yeah.
And
this one's wild.
I have the Criterion Blu-ray for it, mostly because
that Criterion, that's one of the OG ones too.
The script had like the bonuses is a little booklet with like the script and then Carmilla, and I was like, I want to read Carmilla, so I'm just gonna buy this Blu-ray and also have this movie.
I'm gonna get this Criterion so that I can get access to
this book that I could just go to a library and get. Listen, I didn't say it wasn't a well thought out plan, but it exposed me to a really good movie.
It was a plan, and you executed the plan.
Yeah.
And you had to watch it for the vampire. What is it? Vampire?
Vampyr.
Vampyr. Watch it, everyone.
Thank
you for not mentioning the monster at the window earlier. I really appreciate it.
I'm gonna be real. I kind of forgot. Otherwise, I probably would have.
Also, yes, do watch Gothic because it's so good.
It is really like. Yeah, because like we said, like our analysis, we kind of had to jump all over the place to like get everything. But like when you're in there, it's like so much more. It's really hard to do it justice vocally.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is definitely a very visual film, where I was thinking as we talked about this, I don't remember, there's a lot of lines I don't remember, but I remember pretty much everything I saw.
Yeah, I just think it's like gives you so much to think about.
Yeah.
And I really like Mary Shelley's arc. I think it's so good.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. So what is next, Evelyn? What's our next movie?
We're going back to what is
I'm
the
giving
next
you
one?
your podcast back. I'm giving you your podcast back. You can take us out.
Yeah, what is the next one?
I think it'll be something about Dracula.
Yeah, we're going back to Hammer Dracula. Gonna finish that out because it made sense because okay, so we did taste the blood of Dracula. And after that, they Hammer did this thing where they kind of like rebooted a bunch of their horror series. So we're doing Scars of Dracula next, which was sort of a soft reboot. So I like inserting a little movie in between kind of helps us mark that. What do you call the things? Bookend. Bookend the. We finished the original Hammer run of Dracula, and now we're moving into the post reboot era of Hammer Dracula.
I am so excited.
I'm really excited about this one.
Is Christopher Lee back?
He is back.
I am so excited.
Also, at least one Doctor Who actor is in this next one, which is why I'm also very excited.
Oh my god, I can't believe Christopher Eccleston's in this one.
David Tennant, who I don't even know if he was born when this came out.
I can't believe David Tennant is in this movie. Matt Smith is in this movie. Matt Smith plays Paul in the next one?
Oh, shit.
Wow.
Matt Smith would kill a vampire. I mean, he was in a vampire movie, but a real vampire movie.
Well,
he busted out those dance moves in Morbius.
When I tell you, I watched that scene like 4 times in a row once, and I nothing moved on my face. I just watched it, restarted it. I just had a blank face.
It's so compelling. But yeah,
it's he's putting his whole heart into it.
Yeah,
and I respect that.
But yeah, so more we're back with our boy Christopher next time. Yes.
It's Morbin time, everyone.
Yeah, I guess we don't have to bleh at the end of this because it's what noise do drug-addled orgy having goth Victorian intellectuals make?
I think we should take it out with a song.
You can certainly do that.
Have sex, XL.
Beautiful. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Hey everyone, Evie here. If you enjoyed today's episode of Movies After Midnight, consider giving us the old like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date when we drop new episodes. If you didn't enjoy today's episode of Movies After Midnight, consider following me on one of the many social media platforms out there and leaving criticisms or strongly worded hate speech. Either way, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully I'll see you next time.